Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Move Daily Talks. If you're new here, my name's Tracy Steen. I'm your host and owner of Move Daily Fitness, where we help people like you move daily in your fitness, wellness, and nutrition. And today I'm welcoming my guest, Nicola Farndell. Now, Nicola is a transformational health coach, helping women build confidence and self worth using her framework of mindset, movement, nutrition, sleep, and stress. Does definitely sound like our company as well. A certified health coach and qualified personal trainer with over 20 years of expertise in one of the world's largest sports brands. Specializing in women's health, hormones, and menopause, Nicola unwraps the true value of your health so that you can thrive and live a healthy, strong, and vibrant life for the rest of your life. Okay, I'm excited to dive into this conversation with Nicola. Let's welcome her to the show. All right. So here I am with Nicola. And in the intro, I did mention that Nicola used to work with a very large fitness brand company. And I'm interested to know what that brand was and then what segued you from working in that company, I think it said for 20 years, into the work that you're doing today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the podcast, Tracy. And the company I worked for was Nike, so probably the world's largest sports brand, or have been. I think things are shifting in the marketplace right now, certainly in the sports industry. But yeah, I worked for Nike for 20 years. I was part of their wholesale business, which is basically the part of the business that looks after their retail accounts. So, the sports stores or fashion stores who sell the Nike product. And I had different roles across the operations and sales functions, and I was there for 20 years. And just after I celebrated my 20-year milestone, I was made redundant in the midst of the pandemic, 2021. Nike decided to implement a huge global restructure. The pandemic shifted things for the organization like it did for many, many businesses. It just accelerated their digital plans, really. And yeah, it was a huge change globally. In the UK, where I was based, we lost over 50% of the wholesale team, which was a huge cull. Lot of jobs were sadly lost. And it all happened pretty quickly. At that point, I was 45. It was the pandemic, which I think for many people brought a time of reflection and reevaluation of life. And I'd had some personal things happen in kind of maybe 2, 3 years leading up to the pandemic. I sadly lost my mum quite suddenly just before the pandemic. I'd moved house. I'd had a big job change as well at Nike. I had an accident during the pandemic and had a metal plate fitted into my wrist, which, incapacitated me for quite some time. And all of those things had started to light some very little sparks inside of me. And when the redundancy was there, and I was faced with losing my job, I was the main earner in my family. But those things that had happened and started these very small shifts in terms of me reflecting on where I was and what was going on in my life, I just kind of felt like it was meant to be and it was happening for me rather than to me,
Mm.
which it was quite a big thing because I have a whole backstory which I'm happy to explore, and I think we can weave into our conversation today of struggling with my mental and physical health. And those little sparks were things that were new to me because I was in quite a difficult place and had been for 26 years at that point, struggling with anxiety and panic disorder and very low worth, low self-esteem and confidence. But something had shifted with these life changes and events. And then I just kind of thought, this is, I think, meant to be. And I was almost relieved that I didn't have to go back to the corporate world as it was pre the pandemic, because I was under a lot of pressure and a lot of stress with the way the job was. And so I was faced with a blank space sort of thing, what do I do? Where does life take me next? But feeling like maybe this was meant to happen to give me a chance to change how I felt and get back in control of my life and actually feel happy, because I definitely wasn't happy at that point. And working for Nike, doing what I was doing, had started to really create this passion in me about the value of our health and how important sport and fitness was for well-being. I wasn't someone who was into sport before I started Nike, and not for a long time actually while I worked there. I loved the company, but I wasn't, a sporty person, and bought into everything, certainly for my own life. But yeah, some of the things that I did at Nike and what I'd learned, I married up with the skills I had and what I loved doing in the jobs I did have at Nike, and what I wanted for myself, which was brand new to me. I'd never opened my mind up to thinking about that, because I felt very trapped with the way that I was working. So yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell what led me to where I am now.
Yeah. I feel like it's not a common perspective as you had to see the things that happened to you. They actually, you said, happened for you. And I don't think it's common for us to see those catastrophic events, or even not catastrophic, but anything that sort of tips the boat, makes the boat wobbly that we're in. Sometimes we see those things as happening to us and we're
Mhm.
bothered by them. And, I think we get this mindset that everything bad is happening to me. But you didn't see it that way, even though you said, from a past that was heightened with anxiety. So potentially that could have been your outlook, but why wasn't it in that moment? What shifted things for you? Or what do you think the mindset is that we
Mm.
could adopt that allows us to see something that comes into our life as a blessing instead of like a curse?
Great question, because I wasn't that person. I was the cup half empty person. And I actually hated that about myself. I felt very embarrassed, especially quite some years ago when all of the merch started coming out with, cup half full, cup half empty sort of thing. And I felt ashamed that I was someone who was naturally quite negative and pessimistic, and always felt like, oh, that's happening to me. And what I learned is what I now use in my framework and programs, because I had what I call penny drop moments about the value of my health. And they were linked to my mum having ill health. She had a brain aneurysm in her early 50s, and that became the starting point of many health problems, which led to lots of problems that essentially were lifestyle related, which resulted in this very sad, difficult early loss of her life. So that was one of them, seeing what she'd gone through and having those thoughts about, God, look at me, look at my life, look at how I feel and how much of a struggle this is, feeling the way I do every day, but not knowing how to change that, and just trying very small things. I shifted around that time how I exercised, how I ate, and they made some quite significant improvements in how I felt overall. They didn't take away and fix the anxiety or the overwhelm and stress, but they made some changes. And then it was those things that happened, losing her, the pandemic, the accident I had, the difficulties I was having in my marriage at the time, all kind of added up to this realization that my life was one life that was passing by very quickly. And as deep as that sounds, I think all of us know that, but we're not necessarily connected with that, and living with that in our awareness. And so we know how easy it is to just get up and go through the day and repeat and repeat and keep going in that cycle, even when it's a life that we know isn't fulfilling us and going quite the way we would like it to go. We kind of lose control along the way. And so it was those things. And I think it was just a perfect storm, if you like, of having some of those little sparks lit, and realizing that I had to make changes, because losing my job and how I felt would probably mean I was going to struggle to find a new job, because I lacked so much confidence and ability. I had beliefs that I was, midlife and past it and didn't have a lot to offer. anymore and all of those things. And so it was digging deep to go, do you matter enough to yourself? Do you want a life that is better than this? And connecting that with having a daughter as well, that I wanted to inspire and create, her to have a good life for herself. So, it was finding the why, and that's what I use in my framework, is connecting people with why they want to change something, because I wanted to change my life from being 19 years old when my panic attacks first began. I wanted to change who I was, but I was constantly just looking for a fix and stuck in, it's too hard, I'm never going to change, in that mindset. But then that flip came when I really started to think about what had happened in my mum's life, how that could easily be my life, and what did I want the opposite to be, and why did that matter? And I think it's that power that then creates a mindset of, actually, I can do this, and as scary as it seems, I know that I want it, so it's going to happen. I can find a way. I can be a person that makes this happen for me.
Mhm. Do you think we all need the flip? Do we all need that moment that is that defining moment for us to move from a place of, I don't like my life right now. I hate what's going on. I don't like my body. I don't feel good. I don't feel energized. Do you think there needs to be that profound moment of recognition that this is the only life you have, folks? And if you don't grab it by the horns today, it could pass you by. I see that happening for a lot of people. It's,
Mm,
someone gets a disease, their parents pass. And for you, it sounded like all of those things were like happening at the exact right moment for
yeah.
you in your own readiness as well, right? You had to be ready because I'm sure and certain things had happened leading up to that moment that indicated, hey, that might be a good idea to change. Little poke, poke, poke. Here's, I'm handing this to you on a silver platter. Life is here. You can change if you want, but we ignore it and we just keep kind of going on our way. But yeah, do you think there has to be that moment where you flip and decide then, okay, enough is enough, and I am just going to shift my life? And then if we do have that moment, how do you do it? How do you shift?
I think we do need that moment. What I don't think that moment has to be is a moment of something hitting you head on that
Yeah.
is really severe, like an illness diagnosis with yourself or a loved one, or the loss of a loved one. And this is something that I focus on a lot, because many people, as you mentioned, do wait for that catastrophic diagnosis of an illness, or health risk, or something coming their way that impacts themselves, either because it's their health or a family member's health, or they've lost someone to ill health. I think we live in a world where, when we talk about women, for many women, that is what's happening. Take menopause as a prime example. Most every woman knows they're going to go through menopause, but she's waiting for it to hit the fan, and things to go wrong, to go, okay, God, I can't feel like this because this is awful. This has changed too much. This isn't good. I can't cope, can't go to work. My relationship's being impacted, etc. We need that thing to happen, that flip switch to be flipped without someone having to hit crisis point. And I want women to have that flip earlier, proactively, before they reach that stage. So I talk about these penny drop moments that I had in my story to help give people their penny drop moments, to help women go, oh, cha-ching, actually, helping myself to live healthier is going to help me to improve whatever it might be. Finances, relationship, just feeling fitter, having more energy, reducing the overwhelm, being a better mother, all of the things that would lead to a greater, more fulfilled, happy life. We need people to stop waiting for the bad stuff to make them do it, because that is where we are in the world. I think, and this is probably a whole other podcast episode, the way our society is and culture, we are caught up, especially as women, in this belief that we have to do, go, 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 like achieve, 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 do all of the stuff to be good enough, to be a value, to be seen as normal and a success and so on. And so I think it's easy to get caught on the hamster wheel and miss, as we say, the fact that this is one life and you are living it every day. And probably the way you're living it isn't what you want for yourself or what you want for your loved ones, be that children or the rest of your family. So yeah, I think the switch definitely needs to be flipped. People need to have that realization moment. And then it is about, okay, why do you want this? And really emotionally attaching yourself to start to make those changes, getting clear on what that version of you and the different life you want for yourself looks like. Why does that matter? And really digging into that why, not just for you, but for the other people in your life, those who you love and care for and so on. And getting clear about how you're going to make that happen, and knowing that it's going to be a gradual process, because again, we all want things to change immediately when we've made our mind up. And then you see this great big mountain in front of you that makes you freeze and stay where you are. And although you want the changes, you just stay stuck. And that's what happened to me.
It is about definitely chunking it down and taking it one day at a time, one step at a time. You're right. I think that we see, well, we get a vision of maybe what we want our life to look like, and we look at other people and see their lives and sometimes get jealous or envious of someone else who's in that spot. But how did they get to that spot? It wasn't an overnight success. And, everything that we do in terms of growth just takes sometimes two steps forward, one step sideways, three steps backwards, right? And so it is this not a straight path from A to B for sure, but it's getting started, which is challenging for a lot of people. And I think sometimes when people want to make that shift, they'll just bite off more than they can chew, right? They'll take
Mhm.
January 1st or September 1st and they decide that they're going to make this big change in their health and their wellness or their finances or their fitness or relationship, and they throw everything into it. And the plan just seems to be so grandiose that a week in, 2 weeks in, 6 weeks in, and all of a sudden it's challenging. It's hard. There's that rub, right? So you come to a point where it's uncomfortable and it's boring and you're not seeing progress. And so, what would you say to women when they're stuck in that space of, I'm not seeing anything shift and change? I made this commitment to change, nothing's happening, and I just feel like it's not working for me and I want to give up. What's your advice to women in that situation?
We do need to reflect on what we have been doing and really look for those changes, because I think it's easy to focus on the big thing you're trying to achieve, and when that isn't happening, feel like nothing's happening. But to really get honest with yourself through building a habit of, ideally, a daily check-in, but certainly a bigger weekly check-in with yourself on, okay, what have I done today to help me to feel the way I want to feel? So if we just talk about it in terms of someone wanting to improve their overall health, they want more energy, they want to feel stronger in themselves and sleep better and manage stress better, and they just want to know that they're being a healthier person. That's big. And it's then very natural, I think, to look at it, especially in the first weeks and months, and go, well, am I really healthier? What's going on? But to have those smaller goals and check in with, okay, I set a goal this week to make 5 meals at home from scratch, for example, using whole ingredients. And to go, okay, did I do that? And then how did that make me feel? But even just the fact you've done that, to go, that is something that is fueling my body in a healthy way. And that wasn't something I used to do. And so I have made a shift there, and that's a positive shift. And, really trying to celebrate the successes you are having in those habit changes, and then focusing on, small things and how it might be making you feel better. Because I know it sounds a bit cliche, but this is proven in psychology as well. And you hear lots of, scientists and brain experts talking about this as well, and how we work as humans. it is about the journey itself. It's not just about that finish line and achieving that goal. Many of us, and again, this is because it's human nature, we could get to the big goal and then go, oh, this doesn't feel quite the way I expected it to feel. I don't get that big surge because actually we've had the reward through the journey, through the process, and that's how we do operate as humans. So we need to be consciously checking in with ourselves through that process and recognizing that we might be going to the gym 3 times a week and not seeing a six pack or biceps, but we're going to the gym 3 times a week. And actually, what are we seeing from that? Is it that you're calmer when you're around your children? Is it that you're more organized with the day ahead when you first arrive at work on a morning? Or, and just noticing the things that could be quite easy to miss because you're so focused on that end result that might be better definition and muscle tone in your body, for example.
Yeah, we always tell women to try and focus on other things besides the scale or besides fat
Yeah.
loss or weight loss. Like there's so many other wonderful benefits that are transpiring within your own body. And when you were talking about that, I kept thinking of this motto. I can't remember who said it, but they said the trip's the thing. Like the trip, the journey, that's the thing. That's what we're here for. Like,
Yeah.
right? It's not just the end goal. It's just not the top of the mountain. It's the trip. And so
Mm.
part of that is going through all of the things, right? Um, at Christmas time, I came up with this metaphor because I was doing a puzzle with my daughter, and the outside of the puzzle is really fun to do and easy because it's got the straight edges, and you just go along the puzzle, and it's great, and you're like, woohoo, look at me doing puzzles, and you feel accomplished. It's kind of like when you start something like a diet or a fitness protocol or, healthy eating regime. You feel good because you're motivated and it's relatively easy at the start. And then you get to the middle where there's no edges anymore. And you're like, okay, now I suck at puzzles. I'm not very good at this. And that happened to me. I'm like, I don't want to play anymore. I don't like this game. And so we left it there though. And my daughter's like, let's just leave it here and see. And we had about 4 days to do it before we needed the table for a family dinner. And so I would go down there every day and it was so frustrating because I would get stuck and then not see progress and feel like I sucked at puzzling. And like I said, wanting to quit. And then my sister came over and she started categorizing things. So she showed me a skill to do because I hadn't normally been a puzzler, but she would put everything in color codes, right? So there was a group of red, group blue, green, whatever. And then it was a big flower, a donut thing we were working on. It was a donut puzzle and all the blues were together, all the greens. And then it was so much easier. Then you could just create a full picture and then move it over into the space. So I thought, well, that was good. I didn't know that, but she taught me how to move through those uncomfortable moments where you don't see progress by attaining a skill. And so, anyway, you see how wonderful this metaphor is because at the end, if you push through those things that are uncomfortable, the boring parts, the parts where you lack progress, but if you just stay in the pocket, right? Stay in the pocket. You're going to finish the puzzle, right? And then you'll be able to go into another puzzle that's more challenging, a 2,000 piece puzzle. It'll be more challenging, but you'll have more skills and you'll have more grit and resilience because you pushed through things that were challenging and difficult. So I loved that analogy. And as you're talking, I just was thinking about it, thinking, yeah, there's the thing, the trip's the thing, and you got to go through the valleys and the
Mm.
mountaintops and it all counts, right?
Yeah, I love that story. That's such a good metaphor. And I think actually, I've never thought about it like this, but speaking to you, and I talk about this so often, about life and this one life and how we all want a great life. But thinking of it in that context, you don't just wait for the very end to go, yeah, actually, that was a good life. Otherwise, what would you be gaining and what would you be feeling and experiencing through hopefully, say, 90 years of a life? It counts all of the way through. We have to continuously know what we're achieving and what we're feeling. And I think that's a big, big piece of how we've evolved as humans to where we are now, in that we don't give ourselves opportunities to feel what we feel right now in the present. We're always forward thinking and
Mm.
looking, or looking back and worrying and ruminating in the past and so on. And a lot of work I think that all health coaches do is about helping people to be more mindful and present and appreciative with, things like gratitude and joy practices and affirmations and so on. Because, we can forget, like you say, where we are in the journey right now and miss those amazing, incredible things that are happening to us right now because we're just so, much in the future, worrying and thinking and wanting and planning and so on.
Well, that's why I like what you said in terms of looking at your day and seeing what did you accomplish today or how did you
Mm,
move forward, looking at your week, right? Instead of just kind of going, okay, well, this is a full 10-year journey, right? Or a lifetime journey. It's celebrating those small things, those small wins, right? And really seeing that as a way to build your own self-efficacy, this belief that change is possible and that you have the capacity for it, right? If you don't ever stop
mm.
and recognize where you were and where you are now, what you've come from, sometimes we just don't see how strong we are, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And in my journey, that was very much how it was. I thought I was weak, that I was some kind of abnormal freak of nature for how, my mind was, what I was experiencing. But actually, I was probably the strongest person I've met because I was coping with what I had and managing to build a corporate career, eventually have a family and a relationship and achieve lots of things. Yeah, it wasn't an easy, happy, joyful way to be living, but actually, I was much, much stronger than what I gave myself credit for. But, that inner critic was always putting me down and telling myself that I wasn't good enough and that I had something wrong and I was flawed. But actually, I was strong. And again, I think as women, we don't we don't reward ourselves and give ourselves the pride and recognition that we deserve. We default to that negative self-talk and place of, always thinking we need to be better and different instead of recognizing what each of us has inside of us for our own strengths and fabulousness.
So where did that come from then for you? That inner dialogue that wasn't positive, that tore you down, that made you second guess yourself. How did that start for you?
I think probably like many girls, somewhere at school, I think, seeing what was on TV and magazines. I grew up in the 80s, well, 70s, 80s, as a teenager, 80s, then into the 90s. There wasn't social media like we have today, but we still had the magazines and the celebrities and the super wave models, in the 90s. And I think at some point, it came about that I felt different, and that was related to my weight. That's the earliest memory I've got of being around 12, 13 at school and thinking that I didn't look like the other girls and I needed to go on a diet. Now I look back, I was not overweight at all. I certainly wasn't a skinny girl in that sense. I was very normal, not overweight at all. But that started that belief system. And I mean, this is quite deep, but when I was very young, I was bullied a bit by children in the neighborhood where I grew up. We lived in a nice neighborhood, but my parents didn't have a lot of money. I wore hand-me-down clothes from relatives, quite old-fashioned clothes, and I would be called for that. I was called names because of how I looked. I was very dark featured. People would say that I had an Asian look. And where I grew up in the UK when I was young, I didn't grow up with anyone of colour. There was nobody of colour at my school. That wasn't part of my culture where I lived. And I struggled with being called names because of how I looked, both in my biological sense, but then the clothes I wore and how my family were. And I think there was this narrative already there that I was different in some way. And silly things like my mum and dad had a child when she was mid-30s, which, back in the early 90s was quite unusual. Obviously, today that's very normal. But I was 9 when I had a brother. And nobody that I knew had a sibling with as big an age gap as that. And there were just things that made me think I was different, which then I think when you're part of a culture at school with girls and it's competitive and so on, that can easily grow, and then materializes I'm different, I'm not enough. And then I went to college, I went to university. None of my friendship group went to university. And the first summer at university, I travelled to the USA to do au pairing with Camp America for the summer. And I didn't know anybody else who did anything like that. And it was after that summer in America that I came back and had my first huge panic attack and thought that I was dying. And I just think from the work I've done both with therapy, with cognitive behavioral therapy as well, and other counselling, there wasn't necessarily a defining moment that was a trauma or event that caused me to then deal with the mental health problems I had. It was an accumulation of things, like it is in many people's lives, that it all subconsciously programmed into me that I was different, and that different didn't mean a good thing. Now I know now that different is great, and I love, the younger generation, my daughter's 16, who embrace being who you are in whatever way that is. And when I grew up, it wasn't like that. You just wanted to fit in and you wanted to be like everybody else. And so yeah, I think it all came from quite an early age, and then just being part of a society that I do think still exists today for women and girls, that is, building your worth around your size and shape, and how that can manifest if you've got those thoughts already in your program, and the deep part of your mind that becomes your subconscious thoughts and program.
Mm-hmm. Do those thoughts of I'm different, I'm not enough sneak in today at all?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Certainly being in this online space, building a business, which requires you to be the brand, the face of the brand, and talk and put yourself out there like I'm doing now on this podcast. Yeah, but the difference is that when I was made redundant because of the beliefs I still carried about not being good enough and lacking confidence, I invested in a program to help me with self-doubt and imposter syndrome. And I'd never spent any money on personal development like that myself. And that really helped very quickly because I think, as I said, I already had these sparks and I already had this desire that this is going to happen. This is my chance. I've been released from the corporate prison, and having to perform and act and feel all of those awful, stressful, pressures that I felt. And even though I knew I needed an income and didn't know where that was coming from, I just had this excitement. And then I went into this program and started working on my belief system. And I already knew about this stuff because of everything I'd tried to do over the 26 years previous to fix the things I thought were wrong with me. It just hadn't worked. But this, I think, like I said, I was in a different place. I knew my why. I worked with the right people. And that started to shift things. And so we're all human. It doesn't matter what work we've done and how much we can transform ourselves. Habits and the thoughts, our habits themselves, they don't ever go away. Our brain stores those forever. We just replace them. So they're going to keep coming up at times, especially when things are difficult and maybe you've had a negative comment on a social media post, or you've launched something in your business and it doesn't work. Let's say that program is still there, but the difference is that I have the awareness now to hear it, to catch it quickly, to challenge it and go, is that the truth? Is that really what's going on here? Or is the evidence now that proves something different? And then change that thought that's come up. And the more you do that, which is very conscious at first, the faster you get at doing that, as I'm sure and the easier it is to do that. But one of the things for me that's definitely shifted some of this over the past 18 months or so is perimenopause. My hormones last year were all over the place. And the mood swings, the emotions, the negative thoughts were creeping back more, but at certain times of the month. And then I could have a day the next day, I'd think, why was I thinking like that yesterday? So those thoughts were still there, but because of this imbalance and how it can affect your brain, they were popping up much quicker and more dominant than they had been for some time. But again, because I've got the tools, I can work on it and support myself so much better than I could before I went through this process.
Yeah, I love what you said about the awareness. And I think that is so true that it takes time and concerted effort to cultivate an awareness of self, an awareness
Mm,
of what's happening inside of us, an awareness of why we're reactive to certain things around us. And yes, it might take that journey back to that small child that was trying to protect herself at a very young age. And so developing these parts of us that can rise up even as we're adults, right? But that awareness is so
yeah.
key. It's that pinpointing why those parts are there, welcoming them with curiosity and compassion, and understanding that this is a part of how we grow is not putting our heads in the sand about those things, right? About anxiety or depression or how we're feeling, but really opening up and exploring why those things are there. And I think it's a big part of, yes, these parts of us that are there as well. But I like that you mentioned also perimenopause and menopause. I'm in the same boat as you, 54 now, and menopause, I'm almost menopausal. I know menopausal is stated like when you're post-menopause, it's 1 year after no period. So I'm almost there. Got a few months to go. Fingers crossed. It just keeps going. But there's been moments, right, where there's such heightened palpable feelings of depression or anxiety
Mm,
that I'm like, why are you here? There's nothing that I really need to feel this way about. And yet I can feel it so palpably. I feel it in my soul, in my heart, in my hands, in my chest, in my stomach, right? And yeah, these things rise up. And it's interesting because there's almost always a precipitating event that causes this. And so I can look at that with awareness and be curious about it and go, okay, yes, that is causing this, but it's also these hormone fluctuation that is enhancing it, right? Like before, I would have had the wherewithal to move through this without crying my eyes out, but now I don't. What is that about? And so I love that you said there's this growth opportunity for increasing awareness around who you are, how you respond, your reactivity, and then really working with those parts of you to grow them so that when it happens down the road, and it will because life happens down the road, you respond in a different way, in a possibly a little bit more mature way or a more conscious way at least.
mm. Yeah, the conscious way is the key. And I use the words awareness and curiosity so much in my coaching. And I think one of the big things as women that we have to have awareness and understanding of and acceptance is that our life is made up of seasons. And you're the same generation as I am. When we went to school, we weren't taught this. I don't believe it's even being taught in schools right now, which is very sad. But, our life, because of the fact we're female and we have the hormonal setup that we do, means we go through these different seasons of life from that physiological sense, but also, that life is ever changing. And yet I think we're hard on ourselves because, things do happen. Obstacles come our way, challenges come our way, quite difficult life events can happen to us. And yet I don't think we have that acceptance that that's part of the journey as well, and knowing, okay, well, now I need to support myself differently because this is what I'm going through right now. Like when your kids are really young, for example, life is very different and certainly much harder than, or in most cases, than when your child is a teenager, for example, or older than that, and they've got, their own independence. And so I think we've got to be much more compassionate with ourselves, that we are ever changing, and that requires that sense of awareness to support ourselves, with, okay, well, what am I feeling now? And I think for a lot of women, when they start to feel the shifts of perimenopause, it can be really tough on themselves and going, why are you allowing this like you'd be affected this way, or why can't you perform the way that you've always done at work, or be really quite demanding of themselves in terms of how they have been for the past 20 or 30 years without that awareness of, okay, well, something's shifting and this is normal. And so now, yeah, I am going to be more forgetful. There are things I can do to try and make that less of a problem, but also part of the thing I need to do is be aware of how it's showing up, and compassionate and accepting as well that I'm changing, and maybe this is just a new season of life that will pass, or maybe this is part of who I am now, and I need to find ways to support myself better and differently.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. How do we create a life that we love?
We have to get in the driving seat. I talk about being the CEO of your life.
Mm.
It's like anything. Very few things in life happen by luck or chance. We make those things happen. And so we have to make a good life happen. And that comes by knowing what you want that to be. So few women are really clear about what that good life would look like to them.
Mm-hmm.
Again, because we just get on life's path and we take the next step. And you'll be aware of this, so many midlife women divorce, go through huge life transitions, even, sometimes big changes in their wider family or social groups, their career, because it's at that point when you are facing perhaps less of your life remaining than what you've already lived. And I think combined with all of the physiological mental things that menopause brings, that you go, okay, what is this about? What do I actually want? Now, not everyone has that come to Jesus almost moment, but I think we don't go through life checking in with, is this the life that I want? Am I on the path that I really want to be on? Or am I just living by default rather than design? And so that's the big thing, is we have to design our life. We have to be the CEO, the chief executive officer of our life, like we would be if we were running a great big profitable multi-million-dollar business, is step into that role, take control of your life. I use the analogy as well of the captain of the plane, have the training, have the competence to fly the plane. You've got the map, you've got the support there, you can navigate the plane in turbulence or some kind of danger that might come up, an emergency. You need to be that person. And I think too few of us are just allowing life to be the controller, rather than us being in control. So, the first thing is, what do you want your life to look like? And then go, okay, it is this one life, as we've already talked about, having that flip moment that you go, actually, this is one life, one chance. We don't get a second act, so okay, I'm going to take control of this. But a lot of that comes down to self-worth. Many of us struggle with our worth and value. So I believe taking control of your health builds that worth, so that it all ripples out to, I can do this, I can be the captain of my plane, and the CEO of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, that is such great advice. You're right. I feel like so often we'll just let life zip by without really
Mm.
thinking about what it is that you want it to look like. And so, what advice would you give our listeners today to how do you begin to dream about that? Like, is it something that you should grab a pen and paper and start to jot those things down about what you want in your life? Is this something like a course that we should take? How do you begin to, I guess, hold in your mind's eye what it is you want and then reverse engineer those microprocesses in order to attain that?
There's lots of different ways that you can do it. Ultimately, it's about building a vision, a picture, a moving picture of what you want that life to be, and looking quite far ahead, probably, 10 years, to go, okay, what do I want it to be like? Now, to help you do that, there are guided vision exercises. I'm sure there's lots of free ones on YouTube. Somebody may be more of a visual person who wants to put that down on paper, get a big piece of paper on the wall. A vision board is another way to do that. If you're crafty and you like that, snip things out of magazines or look for images online and create something, you know, visual in front of you that, you know, starts you off in some way. Write it down, journal it, maybe do it gradually. But the first thing to do, the tip I would give is set an intention that you are going to do this for yourself. You know, listening to us today, some of it might be resonating with you, and you go, actually, yeah, I don't think I am really thinking about what I want, and I do want the best life. And maybe there are things, it doesn't mean you have to be in a terrible state and place right now. But you know, we all want it to be amazing when we get to the end of our life, to look back and know we've lived the best life we could have lived. So, you know, just make that commitment. That's the first tip, is say, what right now, listening to us talking, am I going to do next? And get that in your calendar, book that in, even if it's an hour that you say, right, on Sunday afternoon, I'm taking an hour to just go for a walk and think about, you know, maybe it's not thinking about the life just at that point, but it's thinking about, what would I like to do? Would I like to listen to a visionary recording? Would I like to get a journal and start writing this down? Would I like to draw it as a picture or a brain dump? And maybe that's the first step. But you know, you have to commit to something for yourself. And something came up with a client recently, which is really the essence of what I do. But I'd heard Oprah Winfrey talk about this actually on a new podcast with Jamie Kine Lima, and she'd, I can't remember how it came up, but it was about whether you trust yourself. And I don't think many of us ever think about that, yet we are the thing that guides us through our life, that enables us to have the life we want, that delivers, you know, all of the stuff that we get to have in this life. But do we really think about whether we trust ourselves? And it's a show up for yourself, you know, commit right now to, I am going to press the pause button at some point and take a bath and picture this in my head, or take a walk to think about it, or chat with a family member or friend and say, actually, do you ever think about this? And let's just have a whole, you know, big blue sky dream conversation. What would you, it's like that conversation of, what would you do if you won the lottery? You know, what would you do if your life could just be anything you wanted it to be, and strip the constraints away? But commit to that right now. That's the advice.
Yeah. Yeah. And good advice it is. Well, thank you so much, Nicola, for being part of this podcast today. Wise words indeed. Can you tell our listeners where they can find you or work with you? We'd love to share that with them.
Yeah, that would be amazing. If anybody has resonated with what I'm talking about and wants to find out more, you can connect with me on Instagram. I'm lifenow_coaching, because I'm all about living the best life you can now. I'm on LinkedIn as well as Nicola Farndell. And I do have my weekly podcast, Women's Health Unwrapped, which is all about giving you an insight into what can improve your health and how to get started building healthy habits. And if you are in perimenopause and you're struggling with some of what we've been sharing, I do have a free guide, which, you know, Tracy could pop into the show notes for you to download and get some tips to start taking back control and become the CEO of your life.
Absolutely. Yes. And all of those links that she just shared, I will post in the show notes as well. Thanks so much for joining, everyone. As always, go move daily in your fitness, wellness, and nutrition, and we'll see you in the next Move Daily Talks.